Hello, everyone, and welcome to my Wednesdays at 1 Facebook Live show. I am so excited today. We have an incredible guest, Frank Stamos. Frank is what I call a wine guru. He knows so much about wine. We've had so many great conversations about wine over the years, and I've known Frank for about 5 years now. And he is the founder of the Urban Wine Club. He also has a wine shop in North Andover called the Cork Stop. And Frank's going to talk to us today about a couple of things: wine etiquette, what happens when you open a bottle of wine, how to taste it, how to pair it, and then we're going to do the fun part. We're gonna do a little bit of a tasting, a couple of wines that Frank selected for us. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Frank Stamos to our Wednesdays at 1 show. And Frank, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on the show. As you mentioned, not just, we've been friends for quite some time, but you've been around pretty much everything that we've been doing from the inception from 5 years ago, from a little wine shop here in North Andover to exploring the digital world as well. So thank you.
Well, yeah, well, you talk a little bit about expanding into the digital world. And I know that that's Urban Wine Club. So before we even really get going with everything, tell us a little bit about the Urban Wine Club, because it's a fascinating app and platform and just portal to wines for people. Tell us a little bit about that.
So over the time of beginning the concept of the wine shop, we hosted plenty of different events, small scale, large scale. And just through the interaction with a lot of our guests who were returning, the idea in the back of my mind was always to formulate some sort of a wine club. And pretty much quite a bit of retail shops do have their own in-house wine clubs. Then you notice a lot of wineries have their own wine clubs. And it basically is pretty straightforward. You sign up if you love their wines, or if you're intrigued about their wine production. You sign up, you pay a fee, you get wines sent to you, or you pick them up. I wanted to take it a step further because I always felt there was something missing with wine clubs, and that was basically the engagement between the guest and the club itself. So one of my partners on the tech side, who's not with us, but I'll give a shout out to him, Ari Kalos, was the genius behind for building the structure for creating a sense of community of a wine club. So basically, it's members sign up, they fill out a profile, and they're part of a community that actually not just receives wines, but they also participate in events that were hosted, unfortunately, pre-COVID, in person, but now hosting events with us virtually. And we're starting to see quite a bit of fellowship because it connects these individuals to something that they either have a passion for that's growing, or has an interest and they want to convert it into a passion. So the platform of the Urban Wine Club, as you mentioned, also has an app that you can download that has information about wine. It has a shopping cart for you to browse and purchase wines that we recommend. It has a subscription model that you can sign up where we send wines to you based on your profile. It has event listings, so that way you can see what's happening virtually at the moment. And also we host a podcast where we have interesting guests in the wine industry or the liquor industry that join us for just fun talk. So we wrap that all together in this package, and we feel that this is becoming something that started as an idea, but now is evolving into more of a community.
Well, you mentioned your partner Ari, and I want to thank Ari in advance, or actually after the fact, because he supplied me with a lot of the assets that I needed so that I could help to let people know about who you were and what you guys are doing. And I would say to Ari and to anyone who's listening, guys, if you have a question, if you have a comment, if you just want to be in this experience with wine, let us know. I can put that comment up in real time. We'd love to answer questions, give you more information, or just hear what you have to say about wine. So I want to thank Ari. I want to thank everyone who's watching. So that's great. So what I hear you saying, Frank, is what I'm starting to see more and more is these hybrid, I call them hybrid virtual experiences where maybe you're where you are and I'm where I am, but we have some commonality, like the wines that we're going to sample today, right? You
Sure.
have the same wines as I do. So even though we're not in the same room, we can sort of share in the experience and have a common theme around the shared experience. So I think that's great. I love the idea of a hybrid concept, and because it involves wine, it makes it even better. So super excited. And just for everybody, go ahead.
Just real quickly, the other great thing about the virtual is that after you have an experience, you don't have to drive anywhere.
That's exactly right. So a little bit later, you guys don't know this, but I've set up my wine, and I have it ready to go. I have a little bit of sustenance to go with it because although this is not my first time drinking wine at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I know that I have work that I have to do after the fact. But so when we get to the wine tasting part of it, I'm going to go to my living room, basically, and I will pour, and then we will start to talk about our wines. But just even related to that, Frank, I opened the wine a couple of minutes before we went on the air. Tell us, let's get into the sort of the experience of wine. Tell us why you should open the wine, let it breathe a little bit, what breathing means, and is that a real thing? Is that a fancy thing? Or tell me why people do that.
Well, there is a science to it for sure. Opening up your wines in advance does help the aromas and flavors develop from the moment you pop the cork or you twist the screw cap off. When wine is bottled at the facility, it's bottled in a sense on an assembly line where it does get hit with a little bit of CO2 in the closure, so it traps everything in the bottle at that second. And keep in mind, that's being trapped for a couple of years in a bottle. When you're ready to open the bottle, it is going to release slowly its true attributes, aromas, and flavors. But the only way to kind of allow wine to develop that way is in the contact with oxygen. So it needs air to breathe. Breathing is basically the development of the wine softening and bringing out all its true flavors. In the very beginning, when you pour yourself a glass of wine, the second you open it, those first couple of sips are not actually and again, I use the term true flavors of the wine just yet because it hasn't developed it hasn't had enough time with oxygen. So buying some time for you is basically opening it in advance. And you mentioned you opened a couple minutes ago, but our rule of thumb is if you have the time, if you have patience, if you've got 20 minutes to spare prior, that would be a good time frame to kind of open both whites and reds to give it some time to soften.
Okay. Yeah, that's as usual. I did everything wrong. I always just like to get to the wine, right? Yeah, and it was a little bit of poor planning, and I meant to have them aired out. But by the time we actually get to them,
yeah,
it will have some time.
Definitely.
Now you mentioned pairing, and I'm going to tell you that I love red wine. Anyone who knows me well knows that I love my red wine. I also love seafood. And so those aren't traditional pairings, right? I know enough that sort of it's reds with reds, right? Red wine, red meat, white wine or light wine, but I want you to maybe kind of go outside of that convention and talk to me about why certain foods pair, and maybe give me an example of a non-traditional pairing of wine and food.
Sure, absolutely. If I can make a couple quick references and points leading up to this, I'll use the word unorthodox pairing of food and wine, is that it's in essence, right away we think of flavors before when we want to pair something, but actually it has to do with structure first. So we're looking for structure as the first point of our pairing process. Lighter wines mean light structure. We want to pair with lighter foods. The reason why I say that is because if one element is overpowering the other, you're going to either lose the food or you're going to lose the wine. So
Okay.
structure is where we go first. Light, and what I mean by structure, you heard the term light body, medium body, full body. So we look for structure, and then second, we look for flavors when it comes to the pairing. So typically, and the other thing that we always miss on is that when we pair categories of food, when for what I think is even more important is the preparation of the food. It's how certain foods are cooked and prepared. So whether they're braised, roasted, grilled, and how they're seasoned is even more important than the actual, say, protein itself. So you
Okay.
mentioned seafood and fish. So yes, you can definitely, and we'll talk about this real quickly soon, is you can definitely pair lighter reds with different types of seafood for sure, because light reds, light structure, lighter in the flavors. Again, the seafood that we're pairing it with, we're going to look at how it's being prepared and how it's being seasoned. Those are the two references that I wanted to kind of point out real quickly. But when we think of seasoning and we think of preparation, the biggest component that's in food that we look for to pair with wines, and typically wines that we're discussing now that we're going to have are referred to as dry wines. Dry wines, basically, everyone says, what's a dry wine? Wines that are typically not sweet is basically the term for dry wines. But the factor in the food pairing is that we always look for salt. Salt is the biggest element that we look for in food pairing. So salt is the biggest component in the food side of it, and then the structure of being dry is on the side of the wine. So drier wines with salty foods. So not to get too technical and geeky out there, but you mentioned, Eric, how would we pair maybe a red wine, because you love red, with seafood? So are you a fan of lighter red wines, or do you like your reds typically fuller?
I typically like them fuller,
Okay.
but I understand what you're saying. Sort of light bodied, doesn't matter the color. Light bodied, light structure. Structure and structure is what you're trying to pair.
Yes. So
Okay.
give me an example of some seafood that you've been wanting, that that comes to top of your mind.
So maybe like a swordfish.
Swordfish.
A swordfish steak.
Excellent example. So swordfish, being that it's a beefier type of fish, and usually it's fillet, and it's served as a fillet of swordfish, usually with the bone or sometimes without the bone. I've often seen swordfish on menus that are seasoned, and then they're grilled. And it's a little bit fibrous, just like meat is. So depending on the seasoning on the swordfish, I usually see peppercorn, salt, oregano, and sometimes I've also seen different types of dry rubs that actually they coat swordfish with. But in any event, a lighter style red, as an example for swordfish, would be possibly a Pinot Noir, whether it's from France or Oregon. They're lighter in style. They're almost translucent when you pour them in the glass. They still have that tart cherry flavor, and they're slightly dry. But the composition of Pinot is full of flavor, but light enough in structure that it will work with the swordfish that's grilled. So you're not losing the flavor of the wine, nor are you losing the flavor of the swordfish in that pairing.
No, that's going to really help me to make more informed decisions going forward, because it's such a basic concept, but it actually makes really perfect sense. I want to bring in a question here from one of our viewers. It happens rarely. This is Gia Adams. I know she's down in Miami, Florida, and Gia is a great friend. It happens rarely, but in the event I don't finish my bottle of red or white wine, should it be preserved with a cork in the fridge should it be preserved with a cork in the fridge for a few days?
Great question.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that, Gia.
We get this question pretty often because we all come across not sometimes being able to finish the bottle, or we finish one bottle and we crack the second one and we're hesitant because we say to ourselves, well, what do I do with the rest if I can't finish it? But to Gia's point, both white and red, the best way to preserve your wine is to put it back in the refrigerator with the cork in it, even the red ones. Because the example here is that if you were to leave your red wine with the cork in it on your kitchen counter and left it there for the next time that you want to have a glass, it's going to turn pretty quickly. So we talked about in the very beginning, oxygen being the friend of the wine when you release the cork because it helps it develop and soften. But at some point, there is the opposite happens where oxygen becomes the enemy of the wine. So it's almost two-faced. It's friendly and then it's the enemy at the same token when it passes a certain time. So usually within a day, the wine will slowly start to turn. When I mean turn, it will convert to getting either sour or bitter, and it turns almost to like vinegar. So by putting your red wine in the refrigerator, the cold temperature, which we'll talk about coming up soon, the cold temperature stops the wine from turning as opposed to for it to be in a room temperature setting on a kitchen counter. So when you put your red wine in the refrigerator, just keep in mind, yes, it's going to be cold, but when you're ready to have a glass of red wine, pull that bottle a half an hour out before you pour yourself a glass so it comes to temperature. And it should taste better, in my opinion, than if you were to leave it out on the kitchen counter overnight.
Excellent advice. Another question from one of our great viewers, Tony Hippolyte. What regions are now booming for quote unquote cheap wines? I know some South African wines were booming for a while. What areas do you like? Thank you so much for that, Tony.
Specifically, thank you, Tony, for that question. And that's another great question. I love these questions. An area that I'm specifically constantly promoting, and I'm behind, but I've been behind for many years, that gets overlooked for, and we use the word cheap wine, but I like to say inexpensive wine that delivers value, is Portugal. The Portuguese wine market is starting to boom again. It used to before, but for different reasons, it's gone through its phases. But they are releasing a variety of great productions that would probably be in the $7 to $9 retail level that you would think, oh, okay, I'll pay $7 for it, but I'm not going to really put much thought into it. And there are exceptional wines beyond that price point. So Portugal for me is the area that you should be looking for inexpensive wines that deliver value.
Okay, great. That's a great point there. And Gia, says, thank you, Frank. I mean, you are like a well of information. I know that you're not we didn't plan this, but I want you to tell people, let me just put a bow on the Portuguese wine. Can you name one? Is there one that in particular, or a group that you like that you would recommend to people?
So there's a lot of different collaborations or co-ops in Portugal that work together to produce different wines. How about I give you the regions of areas? So there's two regions. There's an area that's called Douro, Douro, and Dao, Dao. Those regions, so if you look at the labels of any Portuguese wines, they're going to have that region right below the name of the wines. One winery that I can put out there that comes to mind real quickly that makes exceptional whites and reds that are under the $10 mark is a winery called Ruelas, which is Reulas. It's steadily available throughout the country. Their wines are very consistent. They're priced well and they're delicious.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Tony. Appreciate that question. One of the things that you taught me about Prosecco's and champagnes,
yes,
related to the cork and how people get a bottle of champagne. It's really nice. The first thing they do is they put it into the refrigerator. And you told me don't do that. It was related to the cork. Tell the people what you told me that time.
Well, the reason why we recommend that you only put your sparkling wines in the refrigerator is when you think you're about to have it pretty soon, because I've seen many folks, I've went to plenty of private dinners at people's homes that actually put their expensive sparkling wines in the refrigerator. Sometimes they get forgotten. They stay there for over a year plus. What happens in the refrigerator is that with the corks that are embedded into these sparkling wine bottles is that they dry out over time. And when they dry out, slowly in the refrigerator, they're shrinking. And when they shrink, and when I mean shrinkage, it's very minimal, it's minuscule. It's enough though for any type of opening for air to get into the bottle. So over time it flattens the bottle and you lose the bubbles. So it'd be a shame to
Yeah.
have a expensive bottle there that you want to save for celebrating. And then the moment comes, you pull the bottle out, you're so excited, you pop the bottle, the bottle, sorry, and there's no bubbles or fizz. It's happened
No,
plenty.
that's when you told me that, I said, wow, I've been drinking champagne and Prosecco and sparkling wines all wrong all my life, because that's what I do. I get it. I buy it cold and I put it in the refrigerator. And I mean, I usually drink it fairly. I mean, I don't drink a lot of champagne or Prosecco, but I can understand, I mean, the whole concept of the drying and the shrinking of the cork. We're talking about gas. So just a minuscule amount of shrinkage will allow gas to either escape or come in.
Right. So that if you feel that you're not a avid sparkling wine drinker, recommendation is keep it somewhere cool and dark. And when you're ready to have it, a day before, put it in the refrigerator.
Okay. That's great advice. So now I want to get to the good stuff now. Here we go. I mean, we're going to talk about a couple of wines. And so you recommended a couple of wines to me, and we're gonna be sampling them.
Yes.
Can you first tell us about the Chardonnay that you recommended?
So, when you came with the idea of an idea and a theme, the weather is changing. We're moving. Unfortunately, we moved away from summer weather into cooler fall weather. So we like to definitely adjust our selections and offerings based on the season that we're in. So now that the weather is definitely cooler, we are looking for wines that kind of complement the climate and the weather and the feel in the air. So I chose Chardonnay, even though I know for a fact that there's lovers and haters of Chardonnay. And very often, or very seldom, I kind of, there's folks that are probably in the middle when it comes to Chardonnay. Chardonnay, very classic American staple white wine. It has a lot of great attributes that I think fit for the fall. And I chose a selection that comes from the Sonoma part of California, from a small production named Davis Bynum, and it's in Russian River. So Russian River is a very reputable sub-region within Sonoma that's known for making high-quality Chardonnays along with high-quality Pinot Noirs. But what's more important is what's in the bottle and its characteristics. So classically, California Chardonnays are known for being for two things: oaky and buttery. Those are the main two characteristics that you always hear about California Chardonnay. And when they say oaky, it's because a lot of California Chardonnays are finished off in oak barrels. And then the buttery element is because of the way the wine is made. So we're going to be trying and sipping together this delicious California Chardonnay. And keep in mind, Eric, when I do a lot of our virtual seminars or our in-person seminars, I do get, like I mentioned before, half the folks hate Chardonnay, but they end up actually enjoying it after the experience is over. Just wanted to point that out.
Okay, that's great. And then now you're getting a little bit closer to my language. You picked out a nice Shiraz for us too.
Yes, and then we're going to talk about a blend that comes from the Rhone Valley of France. And in the Rhone Valley, they grow for reds, mainly three grapes: Grenache, Mourvedre, and Shiraz, which is also known as Syrah. Same grape, but they kind of change the term depending on who's making it. So typically in the Rhone Valley, they use the term Syrah, but anything outside of the Rhone Valley, they like to refer to as Shiraz. So Shiraz, which mainly grows in Australia and South Africa right now, is the same. It's identically the same grape as Syrah.
Okay. And I know that a little bit earlier, Tony mentioned that there was a boom in South African wines. Was that related to Shiraz, or the sort of the rise of it, or?
Oh, it was a combination of the efforts in South Africa to uplift their wine market, because so many outside influences from France We're going to South Africa that saw a lot of potential because of its terroir, or its landscape, its climate, and its ability to grow pretty much any type of grape there. So in South Africa, they're known for making a lot of great French style wines from Cabernet, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, and so on and so on.
Very interesting. Didn't know anything about that. Yeah. So, okay, so let's start with our Chardonnay. We're gonna pour a little bit. Okay, let me go over and I'm gonna pour a little bit in my setup. Give me one moment.
And as you get started, let me just make a couple.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right, as you get started. So we're gonna try white wine first. How about temperature of white wine? We all typically want a cold glass of white wine because that's what we're used to. But if you think about it, our white wines are stored in our refrigerator. Our refrigerator is typically gauged at 37 to 40 degrees. That temperature is very cold for any type of beverage. But for us in this market in the US, we enjoy cold beverages in general. So it feels good to have a sip of something cold. So having a cold glass of white wine is refreshing and it just connects with us. But we're not really getting all the true flavors of the white wine at 37 degrees because at that temperature, it's so cold, it pretty much shocks the wine. So it suppresses a lot of its abilities and its flavors. So keep in mind that every minute that goes by, your wine is constantly changing. So as your white wine starts to warm up after it's been out of the refrigerator, the more flavorful it will become.
Okay, good to know. Those are great little tips. Okay, so now you grab the glass by the stem.
By the stem.
And then you give it a little swirl.
And the reason why we swirl is, one is because for me it's just habit, but second for the folks is that it helps kind of accentuate the aromas. It's just pushing back out the aromas so that way you can get a preview of what the wine is going to taste like.
Okay. And then I know you do a very deep inhale through the nose.
Yes. And sometimes I've been told by other mentors in the years is that it's great to kind of take it in with your mouth open too.
Okay.
But you don't have to. So as we're here taking in the aromas, Eric, it's a pretty aromatic white wine. Mm-hmm. It releases quite a bit right from the get-go.
Yeah, it smells beautiful. And I have to tell you, I am one of those people who is not typically a Chardonnay or any light or white wine drinker.
So having said that, can you kind of now see any connection to what you're smelling and possibly the day that we're in, a cool fall day?
Definitely a crispness, definitely a freshness to it that I smell. I'm really ready to drink it. That's what I'm saying. I'm usually, like I said, I'm not a big fan of Chardonnay, but I know that there is a sort of procedure. You really want to just not grab it and drink it like I normally do,
right?
Really kind of allow it to be what it's going to be. But yes, it has a crispness. It has a freshness. You know, it has a like a very light, but firm, distinct aroma. So okay. I'm excited. I'm going to taste.
Now, when you taste, Eric, just take your time tasting it. Let it just sit on your palate for a while. All right. Cheers.
Very nice. Very refreshing.
Very flavorful.
I think flavorful, right? Refreshing. I keep coming back to some version of the word fresh. It's fresh. It's crisp. A lot like the season that we're in.
Right.
And so I mentioned that earlier. Seasonal wine, like what does that mean, seasonal wine? Is it like sort of the traditional foods of the season and wines that go with it? Or is it have to do with harvest of the grape? What do you mean when you say seasonal wine?
Yes, good question. And exactly what you just mentioned. Wines are changing because of the season, and because of the season, we also kind of change up our selections of food as well, and what types of foods are available during the fall versus the summer, right? A lot of fruits and vegetables are kind of on their way out that are available during the summer, typically. And now we're going into the fall time where we're coming across other types of foods and produce that are available. So the climate and the foods that are seasonally is what we're our go-to point to start changing our wine selection as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we moved from light, refreshing, crisp wines for the summer. We're moving now into more fuller, rounder, riper wine selections for the fall and winter season.
What would you say would be a natural pairing with this particular Chardonnay? It's delicious, by the way.
So with this type of structure and style, as I mentioned, we're talking about rounder, creamier, smoother white wines. Definitely a variety of different cheeses that we can discuss. Usually heartier dishes that include pasta with different types of cream sauces are actually a good pairing. We can also talk about different types of soups this time of year that have more depth to them for a type of pairing with this as such. Now, you can also discuss the fact that it's a white wine. We think more of poultry. So turkey, in my opinion, comes to mind. Obviously, turkey's coming up pretty soon. Depending on how you have, you can roast your turkey, whether you're going to have turkey cold cuts. But turkey, in my opinion, is a great pairing with Chardonnay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is excellent.
And as you keep sipping, I hope you keep noticing the change of flavor that's more prominent because it's starting to warm up. At least on my end in the glass, it's definitely powerful in flavor.
Well, honestly, I can tell you that one of the things that I learned from you, probably all the way back 5 years ago when we first met, was that your first glass of, the first glass in the bottle and the last glass in the bottle can be totally different experiences.
Absolutely.
What I have found once you sort of kind of turned me on to that concept was that for me, the wine tends to get more intense the further into the bottle you go.
For sure.
And so when I open a bottle of wine, particularly one that I've never had before, and I taste it, I never say if I like it or I don't like it because I don't even really know the wine. It's like meeting someone for the first time and saying, yeah, this is going to be my best friend forever. You don't know that when you meet, right? So I never give an opinion on my first glass of wine. I just drink it. I can do that.
I respect that highly because I think everyone should take the same approach. Is kind of give it time. Give it time.
Right. And so you've taught me that patience with wine because sometimes I would drink a wine and I'd be like, you know what? Someone give me a beer. I'm not drinking this, right?
Right.
You really have to kind of get to know the wine as you progress through the bottle, which I think is something that, and I'm relatively new to the, sort of understanding wines. I've always kind of been a beer drinker primarily, and I still love my beer.
Sure.
But I've really, in the last few years, and a lot of that has to do with you just kind of being knowledgeable about the wine that you're drinking, I think is as much a part of the experience as anything, that you actually have a sense of the structure, as you said, the characteristics, the profile, proper pairings. When you can kind of engage a lot of your senses and a lot of sort of different parts of your brain in enjoying a glass of wine, that's an incredible experience for me.
Yeah, and I'll take it one step
beginning. By the time I get to the bottle of the wine, I'm just like, let's get some more wine. But
and the thing,
the beginning parts of it, the introduction and the sort of courtship of a wine is a beautiful thing.
And to add to that, Eric, is also what's important for me personally is the environment that you're in. The environment also, in my opinion, plays a huge role on your appreciation, your understanding, and most often when I say your environment, we might be drinking something at a tasting, and things are busy. There's a lot of, it's crowded. You're sipping samples of wine from a cup, and that environment is too busy. There's too much going on. You're not focused. You can take those same wines and bring them to your living room with a bunch of friends, music, comfortable environment, some food, and those wines will definitely taste a lot different than they would at that crowded tasting. So environment also is important.
Wine is definitely experiential, right? It's about the company, the conversation, especially with a new wine, that the getting to know period with one another. There's a lot of things that go into this glass that surrounds the wine. And so you're absolutely right. Where and how and under what circumstances you're drinking has a profound impact on the wine.
So real quickly, if I can let the audience know, what does that mean, your environment, and why does it change? So it all comes down to the way you feel, and your mood also would dictate and lead how things are going to turn out for you from a satisfaction standpoint. So just like there's acid in wine, there's acidity levels in wine, there's also acid in our system. And they're typically referenced or referred to as your pH levels. And depending on your mood, those levels will fluctuate throughout the day. So if you're in a great mood like we are right now, your pH levels are low. So what that means is that there's less acid on your palate. The less acid on your palate, the better you take in the flavors of food and wine. On the opposite side of the spectrum, if you're feeling moody, off, angry, agitated, nervous, and so on, then the pH levels or acid levels will rise on your palate. So there's additional acid bouncing around on your palate. So when you do take in that same glass of wine or food, it won't taste the same as it would if you were more relaxed. So our job in the industry is to keep everybody in a good mood.
That is an incredible observation, something that I never thought about. I mean, I know that environment can impact how wine affects us, but there's an actual chemical reaction.
Correct.
Where, depending on your state of mind, really, how you're feeling in that moment, the wine will taste a certain way and have a certain impact on you, which is amazing. And I think that that's one of the great things about wine, the complexity, the levels. It's not just like opening a bottle of beer and drinking it, right? It's the same, a bottle of Corona here is exactly the same as a bottle of Corona in California, right? It tastes the same, and it may have different impacts on people, but wine is really like this ever-changing entity that really interacts with you and what your state of mind is at that moment.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating. Have you ever had, an experience where you went to a restaurant, you had a reservation, you were celebrating, your table wasn't ready, the wait was getting long, you finally get to a table that was 1 hour late because of what was going on, you had terrible service, but you bought a good bottle of wine and had great food. Often enough, you will still leave saying that was a disappointment, right? So the environment, again, that whole situation has an impact on you chemically because, again, you're a little uncomfortable, you're aggravated, you're agitated, so it doesn't taste the same.
Okay, so that's great. Now let's talk a little bit about, we're going to go right over to the red.
Yes.
And again, let's just remind the people that this is our red Côtes du Rhône.
So Côtes du Rhône, Eric, is a region in the middle of France, and French wines typically are identified by location, not by the grape.
Okay. That's where they give me one moment. I'm going to pour some of that, but continue to talk about it, please.
So one thing many things I like to mention is that, the labeling of wine is very interesting because they could be great, appealing, but they can also be confusing at the same token. So in the European market, specifically France and Italy and Spain, wines are typically labeled by their location. And every location has their different laws that govern what goes into the bottle for grapes. So it's almost a matter of, learning and studying the geography of wine regions all over these countries to understand what's in the bottle. So in the Rhone area, referred to as Côte de Rhone, there's 3 red grapes that are allowed to be in the production, and that's Syrah, Grenache, and Mourvedre. Those are the 3 grapes that they're allowed to use. They don't have to use all 3, but they can't use anything but those to get the label on their label, the term Côte de Rhone. So whenever you pick
I'm going
up
to tell you that the Grenache grape that's my
your thing,
that's my strike zone.
Definitely. So here, classic example, wines from this area are definitely fuller, darker, richer in flavor. And
sort of like me. You're describing me right now.
So it's Eric in a glass.
Fuller and darker, definitely.
There's definitely a little bit of spice in the finish, is why I like to draw this into a fall selection.
Okay.
Cheers. Yummy. Texturally, it's great. It's got layers. Flavors are still lingering. It's got a nice finish that, for me, keeps me intrigued to have another sip.
Definitely a more complex wine than the Chardonnay that we had.
Yes.
What you said, layers. There's lots of things happening when you drink this wine. There's a lot of data to process, if that even sounds right. Right? There's a lot of things happening.
Definitely, I would go with that. But it has lots of character, from the aromas right into the wine and to the finish, I should say. Yeah. So wine has 3 phases: aromas, flavors, and finish.
Tell me what you would say is a good natural pairing for this Shiraz.
So because it definitely has the elements that we just mentioned, for me, I automatically think of braised beef, because the richness of braised beef needs something a little extra. And because this also has some dryness, and what's important I say about dryness is that feeling, that sensation on the finish. And those elements are contributed to something that's called tannins. Tannins are the compound that's found in grape seeds and the skins. And those compounds are in the form of oils. So these little compounds get released into the wine. It's almost the equivalent, Eric, of whenever you've had a grape with seeds in it, you chew on the grape and you crush the seed, and you get that bittery element from the grape when you're chewing on the seeds. Does that kind of paint the picture? So that's what's happening in wine. So when they're pressing the grapes and they're crushing the seeds, it's releasing this little oily compound known as tannins. Those tannins that are found in the wine that you can pick up on the finish is what really cuts through flavors of fat and oils in food. So the tannin is what creates that pairing in foods that have a lot of fat and oil in them, like braised beef is a perfect example of how a wine like this can play with a dish like that, because, again, braised beef has a lot of flavor, but you don't want to lose it in the wine. So here I think this has enough structure and tannins that will work with braised beef.
Now, I know you're I call you my wine guru. When I want to know about wine, I know who to call.
Your wine concierge.
Talk to me a little bit about cooking with wine, because that's something that I just have never mastered or even really attempted, because I don't want to. I don't want to use my wine in the food. I want to drink the wine. So tell me, what makes a good cooking wine, or what is there a difference between sort of your normal? Can you go out and just buy a bottle of wine and use it in a recipe, or Eric, is there a cooking wine that works for you?
Often enough, people come in or ask me, give me a cheap option so I can cook with. Okay, the cheaper the wine is, the less you're going to get out of it in your cooking. So I say use anything that you want. Don't limit yourself to having. And I get it. You don't want to pour $100 bottle of wine into your cooking, but the same token, you don't need that much wine into a recipe, depending on who you're cooking for. If you're cooking for, you and someone else, you don't need less than a cup of wine into a sauce or into a dish is plenty. But, I would say to anybody, the more flavor and more structure in that wine, the better outcome in your dish. But again, this is all perspective and subjective. It depends what you want to get out of it. So just think about this. The lighter and thinner and cheaper the wine is, the less you're going to get out of it from your sauce or from your dish. The more robust and full that wine is, the more flavor you're going to get out of the dish. So I say it's up to you. You can use any red wine or white wine for that matter. It's just like, keep in mind, the more flavor in the wine, the more you're going to get out of it in your food.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great. That's great to know. These wines are amazing. I'm so glad that you suggested them, particularly the Chardonnay. Like the Shiraz, I knew, I was already, over 50% of the way there on the Shiraz because it's a beautiful red. But I loved the Chardonnay in a way that I usually don't really engage with Chardonnay, and maybe that's my mind being closed, but it really has a certain freshness to it that reminds me of a crisp autumn day, right?
I agree. And again, I try to bring Chardonnay into the light of folks that have mentioned to me like, oh, I can't drink Chardonnay. I can't stand Chardonnay. And it's because of the setting that they've had it in. And often that happens with many wines. You're at a function, you're at a banquet, you're at an event. Someone comes around with some wine and they say, this is what we're offering. They pour you a glass, you take a first sip. Because you're not understanding it, you're like, this is not for me, I don't like it. And you move on to something else. But when you present it in a different manner, in a different environment, like as we are right now, I think then we start to change our opinion about that wine.
Now I'm going to go a little bit wine snobby on you here, and I know you'll know all the answers. But
I don't know everything.
But can we just talk quickly about wine glasses, right? Mm-hmm. So you see that I have, for my Shiraz, I have this sort of angular glass that's supposed to be for red wines, and that's what I was told, so I went out and got it, right? You have a more rounded glass for, it's hard, I guess, with my screen. This is not doing a good job. You have a more rounded glass for a white wine or for Chardonnay, but I know that there are specific glasses for specific wines. Talk to me about the importance, the mindset, and where can someone like me, someone who is not super sophisticated, just give me sort of like the floor level, like what do I need for a certain type of wine? So
if you notice, the glass that I'm using is called the universal glass. It's good for both white and red. Now, the first glass that you showed us had a larger base at the bottom, we call it a bowl, and then it gets inverted at the top. So because of that is that your red wine needs a little more work than white wine. So the larger the bowl is, so when you swirl your glass, it gives it the ability to kind of open and develop more. And that the inversion there is because it helps keep the aromas trapped in the glass better. Whereas white wine doesn't need that kind of maintenance when it comes to actually when it's in your glass. So it's always recommended from an etiquette side that you pour your reds into a wine glass that has a larger base bowl and an inverted top. Because when you're swirling the glass, it helps it soften up better and it keeps the aromas lingering longer.
So you just added another level to the red wine that describes me, right? You said the red wine was full, it was dark,
rich,
and now you're rich, not rich, but you did say high maintenance. So I'm feeling like this is me in a glass. Yeah,
right.
I get
Absolutely.
I get it.
Eric, these are just suggested recommendations. It doesn't mean at the end of the day that you can't drink your red wine out of a different glass. Yeah. So you're starting to see new trends coming into the market. You're starting to see now stemless glassware is a hit. I've even seen a lot of wine bars going to stemless glasses. So again, there was this strong etiquette in the past, but I'm noticing that we're becoming a little more adventurous and loose on the way we enjoy our wines these days.
So, Frank, I have to again say thank you. I'm blown away by the breadth and the depth of
Oh no,
your wine knowledge.
I appreciate that.
And you didn't have a lot of prep time to come and meet with me this Wednesday at 1, but you said you would. You suggested 2 home runs as far as I'm concerned in terms of wines. These wines are really great.
Thank
I
you.
want to give you the opportunity to really let people know what you do, how they can interact with you, and how people can get the benefit of the things that I know to be true about you, which is this incredible, like endless bottomless well of wine knowledge. How can people get involved with Frank Stamos?
Thank you, Eric, for that. Yes, I mean, events pre-COVID, we hosted quite a bit in-house. We participate in a lot of events around our area in Boston. Now that things have changed, we're doing a lot of different virtual experiences. So on our platform at urbanwineclub.co, unfortunately the .com wasn't available, so that's why we went to co, is that we want to direct everybody to that site to begin with, and then from there you can download our app, and we're providing a plethora of information about wine. We have the ability for you to kind of see what's going on event-wise. So we have always weekly webinars. So we've got weekly webinars that run for about an hour. They're free to join. All you need to do is just register. And we have interesting guests from different parts of the world that join us, and we discuss a specific subject category and so forth. Those are held on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And then we also have a podcast where we get interesting guests that we interview that are in the wine world. That keeps it fun and interesting. But we also, Eric, and then also there's the shopping element of our platform where, if you like what we do and you're fans of, the way we approach wine, we always load into our shopping cart the recommended wines that we feel that you should be drinking or trying at least for the seasons, right? So the other beauty is that we have the ability, after you order your wines, we either deliver or we actually ship out via FedEx. So we're set up that we can ship wine as well. So we try to make it very easy for our guests and followers that it's a process that's not as painful before. It's all by a click of a button that actually, executes what we believe is the user experience. So you get the information, you get the entertainment factor, then you get to actually purchase the wines at the same token. Now we've got a couple of webinars coming up. Tomorrow we've got a cocktail webinar. Even though we're wine-based, we like to dive into the cocktail world as well. And we've got an interesting guest from Hendrick's Gin tomorrow at 7 p.m. who's going to give us actually these great fall cocktails with Hendrick's Gin that's suitable for the cooler weather. That's something we definitely would recommend you chiming in on because they're fun and intriguing. And we also want to point out that if you like what we're doing and you've seen some of our webinars, we also offer the ability to provide a private webinar for you and your friends and your family. So you could book us to host virtually a wine experience for your friends and family via our Zoom platform.
Sign me up because this has been an amazing experience. I mean, this has been, I already knew that you were going to be amazing, but I actually learned a lot today. And because of the circumstances of the pandemic and everything that's going on, we haven't had a chance to hang out like we normally do.
True.
And so just being reintroduced to wines through my Wednesdays at 1 Facebook Live show has been something that has been needed. I've needed this. I didn't know I needed it until I got here and we started talking about wines. You've been Amazing, Frank. Tell people, what's the best way to get in touch with you, because you have the Urban Wine Club, you have the Cork Stop,
Yes.
you have so much knowledge that you want to share. You're doing the webinars. Tell people what they can do, how they can best reach you.
Social media would be probably the easiest, where you can either hit us up on Facebook, Instagram for both Urban Wine Club or the Cork Stop. Send me a message directly to those pages and I will respond as quickly as I can. I love and I encourage anybody that's listening. Feel free to ask anything at any time. I'm usually up by 6 a.m. and I'm usually in bed by 2 a.m. So for me, I thrive off of folks that actually will consider us and myself as their point, or as you do, as our point contact for information that we can answer questions. So social media page is number one. You can email us, info@urbanwineclub.co or info@thecorkstop.com. Or the better yet, download our app. And if you download our app at Urban Wine Club, you can send messages to us directly on the app as well.
That's all incredible. That is, and so I would recommend everybody, please, if you have questions about wine, if you have even an inkling of an idea about doing a virtual event, Frank and his partner Ari and my guy Nikki, these guys know everything about wine. They're going to have all of the answers. I just want to bring in my good friend Lynn. Really enjoying this. Thank you so much. And I'm a wine newbie, as am I. Probably 5 years now. I prefer a dark, bold, smooth red. I'm exploring white wines more too. Interesting about the pH. Very important for the health of your teeth. Now I know that Lynn is a dental hygienist, so she's going to be dental centric, I should say.
Perfect. I love that.
People who don't like the taste of water are usually have acidic pH. So there are some things that you're going to know about yourself going in that are going to determine where you go with your wine. Am I right?
Yes, absolutely. And that's a great point. And I'm sorry, what was the lady's name? Lynn.
Lynn, yes.
With hygiene and so forth, dental hygiene. I've had folks that have come to a lot of our webinars who actually asked me if it's okay if they sip through a straw because they didn't want their teeth to get stained with the wine. But yes, there is definitely some.
And you didn't shame them, because when I see people drinking wine with a straw, I know you though, you're a gentleman, but when I see people drinking wine with a straw, the wine snob in me comes out. It comes out.
I want folks to be comfortable, and I let them do what they feel comfortable with in the beginning, and then I notice that they actually start to convert as we go on.
Well, I'm comfortable with another glass of this Shiraz,
Absolutely.
thanks to you. Gia, thank you so much. Just followed on Instagram and Facebook. That's what we want everybody. If you guys learned anything, if you had a question answered or maybe a mystery revealed about wine, follow these guys on Instagram, on Facebook. Thank you so much, Gia. Thank you, Frank. I think that particularly now there's going to be more and more need for these virtual events. And when you add wine to these virtual events, it almost guarantees a successful event.
Excellent.
So
this was great.
So as I said, guys, the two wines that we sampled today, this Davis Bynum Chardonnay, and also this Côtes du Rhône Shiraz, they were excellent. I want to thank you so much. We're going to wrap up now. We're about an hour in, and I want to thank everybody who's watching. I want to thank everybody who learned something and gave my guy Frank a follow.
Thank you.
And I want to thank everybody for watching my Wednesdays at 1 Facebook Live show. Frank, again, amazing. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your expertise. I appreciate your insight. I learned a lot today, and I got to drink some wine. So win-win.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. This has been great. I enjoy doing this, especially for you. You're such a great guy. And I hope to be back soon at some point with you again.
No, I get a feeling that the people are going to ask for you to come back. They're going to demand
I'm there
that
for
you
you.
come back, and we'll have you back. So to everyone watching, thank you so much. We'll see you next Wednesday. I don't know what the topic is, but I'll hopefully see everybody here next Wednesday. Once again, it's my Wednesdays at 1 Facebook Live show. Thank you. Thank you, Frank.
My
Good
pleasure.
night, everybody.
Good night.